Today's guest has designed costumes for many series, but a few of those series are Daredevil, Twisted Metal, and the second and third season of Marvel's Jessica Jones. She has also designed costumes for several films, a few of those being The Secret Society of Second Born Royals, The Purge, Election Year, and The Independent. And her most recent work can be seen in the series The Bondsman, starring Kevin Bacon, which can be seen on Amazon Prime. Welcome to the show, Elisabeth Vastola.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. I would like to hear a little bit about what was Liz like as a kid?
Well, I was very shy. I think I was up until a point, probably middle school, high school. I was reserved. I like to sort of be observant and, just sort of take things in and enter into situations at my comfort level, let's say. And I only when I really started to kind of, I think, find more about myself and understand more about what made me tick, do I feel like I really kind of blossomed, in tandem with that introversion. I was always, I really liked school. I always loved, to read and to go to museums and see entertainment. And I loved pop culture and I played a lot of soccer. But I think, around kind of high school, I started to really develop a love for art history and fashion history and English, like, English class, to start. And then, as I went on, in college as well. And it's funny because I think that all of those various interests that really helped me kind of step outside of myself and be more present in the world and take in, I mean, I grew up in New York and then, in Westchester as well. And being in that environment was so enriching and inspiring. And once I kind of put it together that all of these interests could coalesce into a career, I just felt very kind of tunnel vision towards what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I really like credit my various interests to helping me really understand more about, um people skills and interaction. And I just think it all kind of came together for me in a weird way, where what served my interests, like cognitively and also, just in terms of entertainment and having fun in life, also kind of helped me grow as a person,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's kind of how it all began for me, I think.
How did it land on that costume design would be the perfect like coalescence of all of these interpersonal things and this being observant and of this very concoction that you're talking about? How did it
Yeah,
land on costume design?
so first and foremost, I had a very supportive family that allowed me in my, ch childhood and adolescence to try a bunch of different experiences, both, like uh in school, out of school, over the summer, really encouraged, my parents really encouraged me to like, oh, you're interested in something? Go immerse yourself in it. Try it out. See what it's like. And so I was able to kind of try out working, I like would intern, back in like, the 2000s or, late 90s where you're allowed to intern places and, just kind of show up for free and then, take part in a summer workshop or whatever it might be. I kind of I tried out all these various things. So I worked at, like in the fashion closet, Teen People magazine when that was still around. And
Mm.
I found a way to work for amazing handbag designer in the garment district in the city. His name was Anthony Luciano. And uh, I was able to kind of get a taste of various different career paths and vocations and things where it was like, okay, I'm really interested and inspired by clothing. What does that then mean in the world? And
Yeah.
I think by being able to kind of try all of that out, then was able to narrow things down a little bit. And I think that I realized that, going into the fashion world specifically maybe wasn't for me. I still had this, love of um storytelling and literature and reading and thinking about fashion through story and through entertainment and as opposed to through like business and actual, like shopping, etc., in the consumer sector. And I just being able to experience a lot of different aspects to what I was interested in to kind of realize that like, okay, is there a way that this, I can still be kind of immersed in this world, but then it not have to do with the fashion industry. And then I love to read and write, but maybe publishing and, magazine work, etc., wasn't really for me either. And um I think what really kind of hit it home for me was being able to, growing up around New York City, we went to theater all the time. We went off Broadway, Broadway, like all opera, ballet. My mom was like and my dad for that matter, such a lover of theater. And, there's so much of it in New York and so much, so different types and, being able to constantly, be sort of sat in a seat and looking up and being like, oh, this costume design thing is really interesting and feeling like I was, responding to it. And I remember, we saw Guys and Dolls with like Faith Prince and Nathan Lane, and of course Rent, in the late 90s, and seeing these two Crazy for You, like these kind of Hallmark shows that had very different approaches to
Yeah.
design, but equally just were so inspiring to me.
Mhm.
And I started to, the third kind of thing that really set it all off is that when one of the things that helped me kind of come out of my shell, I think, in high school specifically, was I would start to wear kind of crazy stuff to school. Like, not, costume per se, but my mom would take me shopping in the city. We'd go to like, the Betsy Johnson boutique. So anyone knows anything about fashion history in the 90s, like Betsy Johnson was just this like exuberant, playful designer that just I would just love, buying her crazy tulle skirts and then wearing them to like school in Westchester, and I had these like big purple boots and I had this crazy velvet coat and I was like, I feel like I'm in Rent, or I feel like I'm, a part of like this New York City scene as like, a suburban kid. And I think because of that, and also because I just started to establish myself as someone who was interested in all of these, various subjects, they asked me to costume design the senior class play in high school. And I had worked like very briefly as an intern for a costume designer in New York, as a high school intern. So I had like a little bit of an idea of what that meant. But the senior class play happened to be Guys and Dolls. So I felt like very grounded in that, oh, they're doing that on Broadway, like so I could just sort of think of what William Ivy Long was doing and kind of, try to mimic it as much as I can on this, high school stage. But that experience like clicked in me so hard and it was like the one thing that I I realized in that moment, like, I'd rather be doing this than going to soccer practice. I'd rather be doing this than really maybe doing anything right now. And I remember, our like teacher theater advisor in high school gave me this like small costume design book at the end of that experience, was like, I hope William Levy Long, watch out, or whatever, like go forth and conquer with what you're interested in. And that stuck with me and really was like such a literal moment of me feeling like, wow, this is the coalescence of everything that I'm interested in. And I love this experience. And I'm interacting with my peers in a way that, feels comfortable to me. And I'm a senior in high school, so I'm already, kind of more in touch with myself than I would have been as, in middle school. And the whole thing was just very poetic
Yeah.
for me. Yeah, I think in short, it's just having being able to have all these different experiences and then believing in like who you are and what makes you tick.
I hope that the teacher that gave you that book has kept up with your
I know I
connection.
really should. Just thinking about it now, I really should, reach out to him or something because it just that moment, yeah. And I hadn't even gone to college. You know what I mean? I was
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
kid, but it really meant something to me in my life. It's always our teachers, right? I mean, they always it always comes back to who teaches us that makes such an impact.
It really does, for good or for bad,
For
They're
sure.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
impactful. They're so impactful that it's really important that they're impactful in the right way.
Exactly. Exactly.
What was your first paid costume job?
I went to college in the city and I did a lot of very tiny, very sketchy theater in basements all over the place where maybe I got like $100 or $50.
Yeah,
But my first film, which really I think like actually put me on like a trajectory of like, oh, this, I really, really want to do this,
yeah,
was this movie called Indigo Children, which I believe was, it might have been an NYU thesis that I found on like Mandy.com or Playbill.com or Craigslist or something. I mean, I graduated from college and I was just voraciously searching for opportunity, and it was an incredible experience. I
hmm,
mean, it was an, independent film, so small. Maybe I got like $1,000 or,
mhm.
something along those lines. It's the kind of thing you can only really do in your 20s. Like we all stayed in a house in New Jersey and I think I still have them somewhere. I was keeping track of continuity, like Post-its. I mean, it was like and it was right when like that um mumblecore world was really of like Joe Swanberg and of course Greta Gerwig, her beginning was really kind of in vogue, in terms of independent film. And I was trying to kind of, tap into that thing, but really we were just shopping in people's closets and trying to see what people own that could work. And yeah, it was so much fun. It was just like, it was such a great experience. And I'm so grateful that I did those kinds of crazy things in my 20s, where you're just kind of doing the best you can, with the least or with
Yeah.
nothing. And then and you learn so much.
Well, you've had a lot of really cool series to be a part of, the most recent one being The Bondsman. How did you get attached to that project?
The Bondsman, the showrunner of The Bondsman is his name is Eric Olson, and he was the showrunner of Daredevil. So, we had been in contact about The Bondsman kind of towards the end of the strikes that were happening in Hollywood, at the end of 2023 rather. And, he, of course, anytime, even if you have worked with a, producer, director, showrunner before, you always have to go through a variety of interviews still. I mean, Amazon was new to me as a studio. Blumhouse, who was also, who also made the project I had worked for before. But, you still have to go through a variety of interviews and, with everybody, all the other, of course, like top brass involved. For your career, you want to constantly be put in rooms where you're given a shot to interview for and meet new people. On
Yeah.
the other hand, it can be very rare that a director, or a showrunner, writer is able to consistently work with the same designer. I mean, a lot of times that's at the very high level of either success or budget or longevity. So me, being, well, I'm going to be 40 this year, but I was going to say in my 30s, towards the beginning of my career, hopefully, um, to be able to come back and work with continuing, to work again with collaborators I've worked with before, especially Eric, who's, really one in a million, is such a treat. It's
Yeah.
so to continue your kind of collaboration creatively is not always a given at this level.
So I have a little inside scoop into the Bondsman. Okay.
Oh,
Midge, played by Jolene Purdy, and she's a
yes.
friend of mine.
Oh,
And she
I
said,
love
ask her
her.
about this because it was brilliant. She loved it. And she was like, I was sad that we had to go in a different direction. So, could you elaborate on what she was talking about? She didn't tell me anything else. She like just said, ask her about the direction she was going to go with Midge being colorblind, and you were going to do some designs with that, but then it ended up pivoting.
I'm actually looking through my notes because I want to get it exactly right. We had a very specific and eerie kind of Lynchian take on Midge originally, and then I think, I totally understand, the need and want to kind of allow the show to appeal as broad a spectrum of people as possible. They really wanted to open that character up and not dial in as intensely as we had originally conceived. But I thought was that
Do you feel comfortable sharing all of
yeah,
this?
I
Oh,
do.
okay, okay.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I didn't want
because
to put you in a if you're
no, not at all. So Midge, the character, was colorblind. And we see her, as the series unfolds, we do see flashbacks to before that was the case for her. I think and so what we wanted to do is in those flashbacks later in this season, show her as like a vibrant, colorful, character with a lot of, prints and things that really kind of lent themselves to her vocation, which was a baker, and she would use these little flowers on cookies. And I wanted that to show up in how she showed up in the world, in terms of what she wore and what inspired her. But when we first meet Midge, it's in the end of the first episode, and she shows up very kind of eerily and scarily at the Halloran compound, with kind of, the whole conceit for the show, which is that Hub is going to be a bondsman for the devil. And so my thought was that the color would be zapped out of her wardrobe, partially because she can't see it anymore. And so and then also take her wardrobe into a very kind of staid, almost, scarily normcore place with
mm,
very strong lines, like A line, and very strong collar on her coat, and structure and a very strong silhouette. I mean, and have it be just neutral gray tones, and then blow her up color wise in the flashback. There were folks on board, but I think ultimately it came to a place where, Jolene is so charismatic and plays Midge, just she's so infectious, her personality both on and off screen, and so alluring and like magnetic that I think the decision was made to allow her clothing, the color in her clothing to stay that to
mm.
feel magnetic as opposed to sort of repellent.
Yeah.
So I don't think it, I think it was just a pivot.
Sure.
Yeah, if the character is colorblind, I don't think I think she's playing it safe maybe and not choosing color, which would have been, kind of scary. But but I'm proud. I love my favorite episode, I think is 5 is Jolene's. I mean, she just like what she's such a tour de force, and she just like yeah, she just looked amazing. I'm so proud of what we did with Midge, and they ask you and what episode you want to submit for awards, or what episode you're, and I her episode is really just maybe my favorite, because I we just there's more costume changes, and
Yeah.
and Jolene is the best. I
Yeah,
love that
she's
she told you about that.
yeah,
That's
she's great.
that's great.
Great. Is that this episode you submitted for awards
I
for
think
award
so.
consideration?
Yeah. I don't think I'm the only one that gets to decide, but I
Oh,
definitely
okay.
was a proponent of
That
that
was
for
your that
that.
was your
Well,
or.
yeah, that and maybe
Your
the
or.
finale. And we especially wanted to, now that I'm remembering it all, we especially wanted to not have her wear any red or green, because there's a lot of different color blindness, but that's the most pervasive one. And ultimately, she wore a lot of green, but green looks beautiful on her, so
Yeah, it
win-win.
does. Yeah, with her eye color and everything. It's great.
Yeah.
So you can have that story in mind, or myriads of other stories that I know you have. When do you know you, okay, I need to continue to sell my idea, or "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll take that pivot and then we'll pivot." Because I know sometimes it is important to no, no, let me explain. Oh, now I see where you're going. And then you sell the idea. And then
Yeah.
sometimes it's important to take the pivot. Is there a delineating factor for you on how to
Yeah.
decide which direction to go?
That's such a great question. I always take my cue from either the director or the showrunner. If it was TV, it'd be the showrunner, and if it was a film, it'd be the director. I always take my cue from them. Um, because at the end of the day, I, I'm on my costume island. I of course am part of a larger aesthetic and, storytelling collaboration, I I like I'm not the orchestrator of the entire piece, and I am really here to serve, you know, the composer and the actors.
Yeah,
So I will make my um I will, and the thing also, especially about television, is it moves so quickly that I think you have to establish this balance that you're comfortable with, where you feel like you're asserting, you're hired to assert yourself, hopefully to kind of believe in and be your choices, and also be confident in expressing them. But you're only as successful as you are as also, being flexible, and being able to pivot quickly. And especially in television, the pivots are fast and furious. There's recasting, there's different story beats, there's rewrites, there's notes from the studio. There's all kinds of different whims that, kind of present themselves. And I would rather, you know, I would like to be known as a designer that it feels confident and strong. And I think the Midge example is a perfect one, where we presented that, then, the decision was made to pivot off of it, and it's like, good, let's move, because we don't
yeah,
have enough time, and Jolene needs to know that she feel comfortable and in what she's wearing, as her character, and everybody needs to, feel like they're behind the general choice,
mm,
and my crew needs direction, so like we just have to, okay, you don't like it, I love it, you don't like it, I don't love it either, let's go to the next option, and ultimately we still love it.
yeah,
So the other thing I would say too, though, is that it's the other thing that's tough is sometimes when you're in fittings, you and an actor will fall in love with certain choices. And will come up with a pivot on the fly that just starts to feel really great for an actor. And sometimes that can be, something that's tricky to deal with as well. When the showrunner or the director thinks you're going to the fitting with one frame of reference, and then throughout that fitting process, it goes this way. And then you have to exit that fitting, the actor goes to the next thing they need to do. And then you're tasked with going back to your conductor, so to speak, saying, in the last 2 hours, this happened. How do you feel? How, what would you like to do? How can we talk about it and, etc. And I really appreciate and have worked with some, incredible directors, showrunners, Eric included, Michael Jonathan Smith from Twisted Metal included, where they're so receptive and understanding of that process of what a fitting is, and that I'm only gonna, I'm if you don't have to like where it's pivoted to, but then let's come back and I'll talk about it. You know what I mean? But understand that this can happen because at the end of the day, it's the actor's performance and body in the clothes. And so, we really have to take cues and show deference to that as well.
And what I hear in that is such an important lesson for not having your identity be in the idea. It's like that is a separate thing. If you like
Mm-hmm.
this or don't like this, it has no bearing on liking or disliking me. It is this thing, and then I'm over here. Probably in any field, but since we're talking the creative field right now, I'll just reference the creative field.
Yeah.
It seems like in the creative field that is a really tough lesson or a tough um, thing to learn is to be like, that's not my identity. What I'm producing is not my identity. For instance, I even have to like think about myself. I'm like, I can't have
Yeah.
my identity be teacher, costume designer, wife, mom, because what if something happens to each of those things to where I can't do or be that? Then I would question, who am I, you know?
Yes.
But instead,
Yes.
it's like, oh, I can be, my identity could be peacemaker or problem solver.
Yes.
That's something I can do in any circumstance. You know what I mean?
Yes. And so much of costume design is about standing, having all these different tendrils that come off of it. And inevitably, and even in terms of like in a broader sense, like, you know, of course, there are times when I'm feeling really successful as a designer and not successful as a mother.
Yeah,
Like how many nights in a row have I missed bedtime, versus like, wow, I was there for my team until this time at night so they could really feel like they understand what's happening and they're supported,
yeah,
versus this. And um, I do think it's important to like feel the feeling, feel like,
sure.
oh, that's, that idea just got totally like I'm angry that that idea went away, or
The
I'm
mourning going on. Yeah,
yes, yes, mourn it, grieve it, talk it out with whomever is right in front of you. And that helps to release it and helps to kind of remind yourself that, like, oh, but it's just a moment. It's just one blip. And now that that has happened, the way that I can get out, sort of release myself from it is to sort of like observe and then react and in a way that feels like collective and present, and not like necessarily aggressive or, reactionary, let's say. Like,
yeah,
so but I do think, the only way to be able to make that pivot or that turn is to feel it and to allow yourself to feel disappointed, and it's such a vulnerable thing working in a creative field, and my kryptonite is always my first presentation of my ideas to the director or the actor or the showrunner. I always feel so laid bare, like
mhm,
so vulnerable in that moment. And what's happening increasingly is that it has to happen digitally. You have to kind of send a deck along because they're so busy or they're on the other side of the country and you just need quick feedback, or if it's not quick feedback, it warrants a conversation, etc. But I struggle sometimes feeling like it's ready to be sent. Or I over edited, or or what, what's the format that's going to look the best to that person. It's
Yeah.
very, it feels like a digital representation of inside my brain, which feels so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And especially when you get feedback that's like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Then you're like, what? You know? But I always remind myself that it's like, just do it. Just send it, feel as good as you can in the moment and then move off of it to the next thing. And that will help remind you that it's just a rolling points of ideas and moments in this grander job, that's full of millions of them. And but it's hard. I mean, it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does feel very personal at times.
Oh,
It's hard
totally.
to separate that at times. So,
Yeah, and sometimes your best work feels the most personal, or like you look back and you're like, wow, the things I really felt in touch with feel like the most what I'm proudest of, as
mhm.
opposed to jobs that you're like, well, I don't really, do I care? I don't know, gray or black pants, whatever, like
Yeah.
that to me feel, then you're kind of so divorced from the process and that it's like less gratifying,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's but then you have to know that, okay, like with these intense feeling might come intense heartbreak, but might also come, intense pride and happiness.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Which is why we get into the creative in the first place, is
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
it's like part of us, part of what's inside
Yeah.
us to come out. Okay, so you talked a little bit about how fast paced working for television is, or series, I should say, some of them being streaming, of course. Um,
Yes.
so what the Bondsman is a 30-minute slot. How does it compare to a 60-minute series? Like, is it faster or is it about the same?
What it changes is your number of filming days, but it's kind of like in relation to how much you have to film and how big the episode is. So if the episode is 35 pages as opposed to 70 pages, they're all mini movies no matter what. And you kind of get the scale of the amount of time you have to do something, is kind of in relation to how much there is to do.
Hmm.
There, of course, are some jobs that are particularly difficult and particularly fast and chunky. And there are some that are a little more, I mean, luxurious is not the word, but like can feel a little bit more at a, you know, better pace. And a lot of times that tone is set by, either the studio or, the amount of time they've given the production to do something. I haven't really found any personally difference between 30 minutes to an hour. It's kind of the same pace no matter what. And the difference in terms of, how much to do and how much time to do it in and how much crew you have to do it really depends on your line producer, on the tone set by the showrunner, and or your lead actor, whomever is really, able to kind of step in and say, I'm not, this is what we're gonna do. And then, the studio production, acquiesces or doesn't. But I have found that episodic streaming, streaming episodics television are just all at such a pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, that no matter the length.
Yeah, that's interesting. What is something new about the Bondsman that you had to do that you had not done before?
The Bondsman was the first show that I've really had to think hard about performance wear. Like, so for example, Jennifer Nettles plays Marianne in the show, who is a aspiring and established country music singer. And she had well, three ultimately, but well, four, counting the flashback performance outfits. And I really, that was something that was so exciting to me and so exciting to know that I had to dive in research wise too, and watch, as who doesn't love watching as much Dolly Parton as possible, and Loretta Lynn and Casey Musgraves, and really kind of cherry picking all over the country music history, of women in country music, and then kind of understanding more about, okay, but what's her environment, what's her frame of reference, and how she wants to be seen on stage, what's an important color to bring to this, what's the vibe. I mean, there's so many different um and the other thing I would say is that in costume design, I feel, especially in, for on, well, really on stage too, but especially for motion picture, you're constantly trying to counteract the performance. You're constantly trying to negate the fact that this is a performance and try to make the audience feel like this is real, and that they're what they're wearing is real to these characters and feels seamless, and so that you're not sort of like stepped out of the veil. And here it was this sort of like coming back around into like, okay, but what's the real, like, what is it? What would she choose to then be performative? You know what I mean? And what does that mean? And this is the first way we're seeing her, and it still has to feel kind of down to earth and, alluring to Kevin Bacon's character. And that was that whole, and then on top of that, Jennifer Nettles is herself, Grammy award-winning country music star. So how do I negotiate kind of where Marian ends and Jennifer begins? And then how do I bring myself to that first fitting,
Mm,
knowing that Jennifer is coming in with years and years of experience and understanding in a way that I never could have, just looking at photos and watching
yeah.
performances, as an audience member. But she's so incredible and collaborative and generous, um and in touch, with the character in terms of how we were building her together. And it was really one of my favorite processes of this piece for sure.
Yeah. So how were you able to collaborate with her? What kind
Well,
of things did she kind of cast like, oh, well, what if I did it
so
this way? Or,
yeah, so originally I was thinking that we were going to completely build her first outfit, and it was going to be kind of a vibe off of there was so much about this show that was referencing the coal miner's daughter.
Mhm.
And so I really thought that I wanted to take a stab at paying homage to Loretta Lynn and getting that kind of like, and Sissy Spacek, and getting that like kind of lace and light and feathery and sort of dreamy, airy quality of Marianne on stage. And that's also how it was written in the script, that sort of hub turns and you reveal this character, and she's like an angel on the stage, and this is sort of angel demon dichotomy happening, of course, in the show. And so we built this, we got a great pair of pants, and we built this top that felt like that. Felt flat, sort of airy and floaty, and but still vintage, and something that, Marianne could have sewed. But I also, as you do, have, a bunch of options. And some of the options I had, I just felt like were great instant reads, like sequin dresses and cotton dresses, and, like things that where you just look at, and the dress is just, it's there, and, there isn't that much story in it. It's more about the person in the dress. So instead of, having a moment where this is, maybe we're trying to say a lot in the costume, you have a moment where the costume is working for the actor, and really is just kind of an attaché to the performance. And Jennifer was tried the lace, the sort of like airy thing that we had built and was a proponent of it and was, really like, yeah, this is what you're going for. I'm into it. And we photographed it and she really gave it a shot. And we also tried some of the other dresses. But it was so undeniable to me when she put that, already made off the rack, corally pink sequin dress on, which had no embellishment or fringe or anything. It was just what it was. That she just looked so good. Like it was just a bright, incredible color. That color is nowhere else in the show. And I, the studio, of course, Eric, Jenna, like it was just the right choice,
Yeah.
and we went, then it became about, well, how much do we embellish it? We want to embellish it a little bit. Jennifer was very much about like, she looks to Dolly, and Dolly is embellishment,
Yes.
to the highest level. And so we thought, well, maybe Marianne went down, she got like some, things that she could add on to the neckline and then some fringe, and we'll leave it at that. Originally we were maybe going to put something on the hem, but we really kind of scaled back as much as we could. And we only got there through that process because Jennifer was so open to she just came into it. And of course, I'm coming to that fitting being like, wow, how many performance dresses has Jennifer tried on? You know what I mean? So I wasn't confident in the ones that were just off the rack. I felt like I needed to make something that was special for this character in this moment.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we landed in the right direction, and it was just because we had such a great fitting and she was so open that I think we got there so quickly and collaboratively.
Yeah. That's good. It makes me think too that something I've experienced, it's like sometimes you arrive at the final decision by making some other choices and
Yes.
then those not being what was right. And that wasn't wasted time though.
No,
I
yeah.
think it's easy for people to go, well, I just wasted 4 hours today working on this and shopping for this, and then we ended up going this direction. But you're like, no, that actually helped me know to go in this direction by doing that path.
Yes.
For me personally.
Yeah, just jumping off of that, I felt guilty for a while because I had my shop make this thing and we
Yeah.
shopped the fabrics, made this beautiful thing. And then, and so exactly what you're saying. It was like, I just wasted everybody's time. And I think what's the best is when you land on the thing and then everybody around is like, yes, we
Yeah.
believe in what, Liz just like put on her, and we believe in what we're looking at on camera. And that's one of the things I hope for in crew members, when I'm meeting new people or whatever, is that it's about it's about your work and your and everything, but it's also about like there's this undercurrent of flexibility and of understanding this process, and that if you can bring support to the table every time, be it emotional or whatever, that's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. What do you look for in a project in order to say yes to it or to realize you should say no to it, or do you ever say no?
Well, these days, it's funny because, our industry is in a real rough moment, I think. The American industry, let's say, where, work being in the States is, it it's very tough. So
Mm.
it's to answer that question honestly in this current moment would be, there isn't much currently that I would really feel bold enough to say I won't. But there are some things, and I think that, well, first of all, to be frank, I mean, I am a mother to a 3-year-old, and we, it would have to somehow make my husband and I would have to be able to suss out how it was going to work,
Yeah.
and we are both on, we're both sort of like we like I've made the choice to prioritize what I'm doing. And so we are like very much together and like we want to work to make it work. But if there's some reason that we feel like it wouldn't, for example, if my daughter couldn't deal, in some way with what the situation was that we had created, then I would have, that would take precedence for sure. But I also think it's important at any level when you go into any of these jobs as a freelancer, you often feel like you just want the job. Like you're just like, just I'll do the job. Whatever the job is, I want it because I need to continue to work because work is not a sure thing.
Yeah.
But red flags that come up in the beginning of the process, be it the interview process or the beginning stages of prep, or, there's all kinds of things that you need to sort of be able to step back and say, wait a minute, like, am I going to come out of this? How is this going to serve me in some way? Am I going to come out of this more like battered than I am up. Like is this are these is the group of people setting me up for success? Are they setting me up to fail?
Yeah.
And that could be with your crew, with your budget, with what you're given support wise to do the job, be it if you're, doing it in some place where you need a car or you need X, Y, and Z. And that is, I think, more important, even more important on indie jobs where you're not working under a union contract.
Hmm.
But it's important across the board. And I think um, those are really important questions. And there have been things that I've turned down recently and in the beginning of my career because I've sort of like laid it all out on the table and I've assessed with like my support system, which is either going to be my partner or other costume designers who are my friends or my friends who had no idea or my sister or my parents, to be like, this is the situation. Am I being set up to fail? Because there are times where designers get fired. I mean, I've come in on jobs where a designer has gotten fired, and basically they've just given me what the first designer was asking for. So it's like those are things that you really sometimes need to have your senses attuned to. And then as soon as you feel like this is not going well, you speak up for yourself,
Yeah.
in a way that's not, that still kind of supports collaboration, but say, like, this is what you're asking me to do, and these are the difficulties that this job is presenting, and I'm wondering if there's a way that we can, I can be better set up to provide what you're asking for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's a good evaluation. I have one deep dive question.
Yes,
Well, I have a few, but I have one because
love
I
it.
saw this one actually on Instagram. I'm going to give them credit. Who I saw post it was an account called Die Without Regrets.
Mm.
And this was the question they posed, like within a series of multiple questions. When was the last time you did something that scared you but moved you forward?
I have two answers. One
Okay.
of them is kind of maybe run of the mill, but very real, which is I'm prone to be very anxious, almost to the scale of a little of frightened, like right before my first fitting
Mhm.
with any of the main actors, especially like number one, two, three, four. Because it's keenly aware that until they come in, and I think it goes back to being, very introverted as a child. I, I'm keenly aware of how much can go wrong, which usually doesn't, because you have to do the prep work, have the conversations, the emails, whatever. But until you have somebody in front of you in the fitting room trying clothes on, it can go all kinds of different ways.
Yeah.
And I always have to remind myself that exactly what you said, which is that this is very scary, but think about on the other side of the next 2, 3 hours how much forward you will move because you are going to know what the boots are and what the jeans you are going to be able to give your breakdown crew, your tailoring crew, your costuming crew, so many people, so much clarity about what is happening with the costume design. Once you know that this feels scary and vulnerable in this moment because you don't want to disappoint the actors, you don't want to disappoint the showrunners, the studio, you don't want to disappoint yourself. You don't, which is the most important thing, and maybe as important, you don't want to disappoint your crew. But on the other side of this is and there have been times where fittings start out very, can start out very cagey and a little, oh, maybe this person doesn't like me, or I don't know what's happening. Have I presented myself correctly? But then you just sort of like the time passes and the clothes go on and off, and you're moving forward immediately. So that is something it's very hard for me to get over, and maybe I never will, and I just have to kind of sit with it.
Mm.
But I would also say that I having my daughter was very scary. I'm not sure if we talk enough about being a parent in this industry and how very at odds the industry is to family life, whatever your family life may be, even if you're not a parent, you're just, devoted partner or whatever it is, your friends, your parents, like your siblings, obviously, like it's it's so at odds with having any kind of interior personal life. And when I wasn't even always sure I wanted to have a child, but then we did. And then it was like how I just was I knew I felt like held, am I being held back now? I can't go do that job because like I'm going to maybe give birth in a month. Like, I
Yeah.
and then what is life going to look like? You have no idea what life is going to look like as, with a newborn and et cetera, et cetera. And then I continue to make choices that feel scary would move us forward. Like when we moved, I moved out of Brooklyn and out of New York City up into Westchester because I knew it'd be better for, her but it felt scary because I was leaving, leaving sort of the nucleus of the costume design environment, in New York, in the tri-state area. But it moved us forward in so many ways. And, of course, if it feels like something you want to do and you're fortunate to be able to do it, if you want to do it, actually having a kid, it will move you forward in your life in one way or another. Of course, it's not the only way to move forward in life, but for me, it was. And I was very scared because and it probably, it did take a while then to like recover back into the work. But the more I talk to other people, it's like who have a child in the industry who do what we do, the more community there is, it's like so much better, and now I'm a part of the Costume Designers Guild. I'm a part of the United Scenic Artists in New York. Both get union and guild have separate groups within, committees on being a parent and and so to sort of foster that, those connections and talk about how hard it is. And it's hard for everybody, I know, but it feels
But it
particularly,
adds, yeah, no, it definitely adds another element, another
yes,
layer of responsibility, of the mom guilt that you get
yes,
when you're like, like you were saying earlier, should I be? I only made it home 2 nights this week to do
yeah,
this time, and I get
yes,
it. Yeah, it's a lot.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I think that too, like all kinds of other things like paid time off or family leave or whatever, only exist if you're on a job, but then you're on a job which is only this number of months long, and part of it you're going to be like, it just, there's so much of it that is, yeah, that's really rough. But no regrets, to go back
Yeah,
to your original
man. Yeah, we have two kids, and I'm like, I can't get enough time. Like anytime I'm
yeah.
away from them, I'm like, I cannot wait until I see you again.
Yes,
And then it's gone. Like you only have them in your home for X amount of years. Yeah.
exactly,
And then
exactly.
and then you'll never get it back. So I'm
I
like,
know.
so I get it. I get the juggle that's tricky. And not to the extent that you're doing it, but I do get it.
No, I mean everybody, and I even hesitate to say it, but maybe that's also, part of the issue is that we all hesitate to say it, but everybody has that issue. It's like the juggle of modern working life, being a working parent is, it feels, especially with, the internet and, needing to be available all the time and people feeling like you're available all the time. And yeah, and then you only get so much time where your kid really actually wants to be around you. And then, yeah, it's rough.
Yeah. Ooh, thanks for that. That was good deep talk. I like that.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay, a few rapid fire questions that are not so
Okay.
deep. Is there a movie you can watch over and over again?
Oh, movie I can watch over and over again. I can watch Hook over
Oh,
and over again. I
nice.
That movie, at this point it's just nostalgia, and also it's so funny to me. Like it, but it's like every stage of my life I would watch that movie and be like, "Oh my God, the costumes, the Lost Boys." And then there'd be like, "Is that Julia Roberts?" And then there'd be like, Robin Williams, so funny. And then I get the moment of like Robin Williams with on the plane with his son, where this kid is like banging the baseball, and he's like, "Ah, stop that," and I just, yeah, that movie is instantly, I'm like, it's just, it's always, yeah. And
That's
also, I have such an affection for the 90s. And, like, of course, I think everybody, their adolescent years are their most, what they look back at, maybe fondly, uh, in terms of pop culture. So, yeah.
yeah, that's good. Is there a place you have visited that you suggest other people have to check out at some point in their life?
I was very fortunate growing up in that my parents took us all over the place. I think the one thing I can say is that, like, the ability to travel somewhere that's completely different from where you are, just to sort of, and then try as much as you can. I mean, obviously being a tourist is a thing, can be difficult to really get a feel. But we went to, East Asia. We went to Japan at one point, Vietnam, Cambodia. I mean, for me, I think going to Tokyo and Kyoto, being from New York, and so having a sort of like a love and affinity for city life is just so related, but so different. And yeah, it just really blew my mind, and continues to be. One other thing I want to say quickly about travel is that more recently in my life, before we had our daughter, my husband and I went to Vancouver Island, off the coast of, obviously, Vancouver. It's a small island in British Columbia. It is such a special place. It's so, if anybody ever wants to go someplace that's like out of the way, kind of, like, feels a little sleepy and natural and beautiful. And I'd love, I mean, my husband is from the Pacific Northwest, so like we already have a little bit of an affinity for that area. But oh God, that was such a beautiful place to go. So I'm gonna say Japan and Vancouver Island.
Those are great choices. Thank you so much for being on the
Oh, thank
show.
you.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
such thoughtful, amazing questions.
Oh, good. Well, come on anytime. And um, I need to get Jolene on because I would like to, if you hear of any actor that would love to talk what it is to put on a costume and have the character enter the room, I would love to also include actors on the show so that the audience sees how important it is for their performance.
Yes. And there's not enough chatter, I think, between actors and costume people outside of a job of like what the fitting room is like and what one needs from the other and like what it's all about. I mean, I yes. Jolene is the best. I mean, she's so patient and so also so generous, with her in her collaboration, and I love her so much.
Oh, that's sweet. Well, she spoke she was like, "Oh my goodness, have you already done the interview?" And I was like, no, that's why I'm asking you. Thank you so much, and welcome back anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Voice of Costume. Check out voiceofcostume.com to learn more, see upcoming guests, and be a part of our growing community.